to be at any given hour of any given day?" "Then that Dutch horn player threw the bomb," propounded the head of the Detective Bureau, ponderously. "Of course. Tossed it right up 3 stories, and kept playing his infernal trombone with the other hand all the time. You ought to be carrying a hod." Nevertheless, the police hung tenaciously to the theory that the musician was involved, chiefly because they had nothing else to hang to. The explosion had been very localized, the room not generally wrecked, but the chair which seemed to be the center of the disturbance, and from which the Honorable William Linder had risen just in time to save his life, was blown to pieces, and a portion of the floor beneath it was much shattered. The force of the explosion had been above the floor downward, not up through the flooring. As to murderously inclined foes, Mr. Linder disclaimed knowledge of any. The notion that the trombonist had given a signal he derided as an old sleuth pipe dream. As time went on, and clues came to nothing, the police had no greater concern than quietly to forget, according to custom, a problem beyond their limited powers. With the release of the German musician, who was found to be simple-minded to the verge of hat-witlessness, public interest waned, and the case faded out of current print. Average Jones, who was much occupied with a pair of blackmailers operating through faked photographs about that time, had almost forgotten the Linder case, when one day, a month after the explosion, Waldemar dropped in at the Astercourt offices. He found a changed Jones, much thinner and finer than when, 8 weeks before, he had embarked on his new career, at the newspaper owner's insistence. The young man's color was less pronounced, and his eyes, though alert and eager, showed rings under them. "You have found the work interesting, I take it," remarked his visitor. "Rather," drawled Average Jones appreciatively. "That was a good initial effort, running down the opium pill mail order enterprise." "It was simple enough as soon as I saw the catchword in the wanted line." "Anything is easy to a man who sees it," returned the older man sententiously. "The open eye of the open mind, that has more to do with real detective work than all the deduction and induction and analysis ever devised. It is the detective part that interests me most in the game, but I haven't had much of it yet. You haven't run across any promising ads lately, have you?" Waldemar's wide, florid brow wrinkled. "I hadn't thought or dreamed of anything for a month but this infernal bomb explosion." "Oh, the Linder case. You're personally interested?" "Politically. It makes Linder's nomination certain. Persecution. Attempted assassination. He becomes a near martyr. I'm almost ready to believe that he planted a fake bomb himself." "And fell out of a third-story window to carry out the idea? That's pushing realism rather far, isn't it?" Waldemar laughed. "There's the weakness. Unless we suppose that he under-reckoned the charge of explosive." "They let the musician go, didn't they?" "Yes. There was absolutely no proof against him, except that he was in the street below. Besides, he seemed quite lacking mentally." "Mightn't that have been a sham?" "Alienists of good standing examined him. They reported him just a shade better than half-witted. He was like a one-ideaed child, his whole being comprised in his ability and ambition to play his B-flat trombone." "Well, if I needed an accomplice," said Average Jones thoughtfully, "I wouldn't want any better one than a half-witted man. Did he play well?" "Atrociously. And if you know what a soul-shattering blare exudes from a B-flat trombone—" Mr. Waldemar lifted expressive hands. Within Average Jones' overstocked mind something stirred at the repetition of the words B-flat trombone. Somewhere they had attracted his notice in print, and somehow they were connected with Waldemar. Then from amidst the hundreds of advertisements with which, in the past weeks, he had crowded his brain, one stood out clear. It voiced the desire of an unknown gentleman on the near border of Harlem for the services of a performer upon that semi-exotic instrument. One among several, it had been cut from the columns of the Universal on the evening which had launched him upon his new enterprise. Average Jones made 2 steps to a bookcase, took down a huge scrap book from an alphabetized row, and turned the leaves rapidly. 300 East 100th. You won't mind, will you," he said to Waldemar, "if I leave you unceremoniously?" "Recalled a forgotten engagement?" asked the other, rising. "Yes. No. I mean, I'm going to Harlem to hear some music. 34th's the nearest station, isn't it? Thanks. So long." Waldemar rubbed his head thoughtfully as the door slammed behind the speeding advisor. "Now what kind of tune is he on the track of, I wonder?" he mused. "I wish it hadn't struck him until I'd had time to go over the Linder business with him." But while Waldemar rubbed his head in cogitation, and the Honorable William Linder, in his Brooklyn headquarters, breathed charily out of respect to his creaking rib, Average Jones was following fate northward. 300 East 100th Street is a house decrepit with the disease of the aged. Its windowed eyes are rheumy, it sags backward on gnarled joints. All its poor old bones creak when the winds shake it. To Average Jones' inquiring gaze on this summer day, it opposed the secrecy of a senile indifference. He hesitated to pull at its bell knob, lest by that act he should exert a disruptive force which might bring all the frail structure rattling down in ruin. When at length he forced himself to the summons, the merest ghost of a tinkle complained petulantly from within against his violence. An old lady came to the door. She was sleek and placid, round and comfortable. She did not seem to belong in that house at all. Average Jones felt as if he had cracked open one of the grisly locust shells which clung lifelessly to tree trunks, and had found within a plump and prosperous beetle. "Was an advertisement for a trombone player inserted from this house, ma'am?" he inquired. "Long ago," said she. "Am I too late, then?" "Much. It was answered nearly 2 months since. I have never," said the old lady with conviction, "seen such a frazzled lot of folks as B-flat trombone players. The person who inserted the advertisement has left, a month since." "Could you tell where he went?" "Left no address." "His name was Telford, wasn't it?" said Average Jones strategically. "Might be," said the old lady, who had evidently formed no favorable impression of her ex-lodger, "but he called himself Ransom." "He had a furnished room?" "The whole 3rd floor, furnished." "Is it let now?" "Part of it, the rear." "I'll take the front room." "Without even looking at it?" "Yes." "You're a queer young man. As to price?" "Whatever you choose." "You're a very queer young man. Are you a B-flat trombone player?" "I collect 'em," said Average Jones. "References?" said the old lady abruptly and with suspicion. "All varieties," replied her prospective lodger cheerfully. "I will bring 'em tomorrow with my grip." For 5 successive evenings thereafter, Average Jones sat in the senile house, awaiting personal response to the following advertisement which he had inserted in the Universal: "Wanted, B-flat trombonist, must have had experience as street player. Apply between 8 and 10 p.m. R. 300 East 100th Street." Between the ebb and flow of applicant musicians he read exhaustively upon the unallied subjects of trombones and high explosives, or talked with his landlady, who proved to be a sociable person, not disinclined to discuss the departed guest. Ransom, his supplanter, learned, had come light and gone light. 2 dress suitcases had sufficed to bring in all his belongings. He went out but little, and then, she opined with a disgustful sniff, for purposes strictly alcoholic. Parcels came for him occasionally. They were usually labeled "glass, handle with care." Oh, there was one other thing. A huge easy armchair from Carruthers and Company, mighty luxurious for an $8 lodger. "Did he take that with him?" asked Average Jones. "No. After he had been here a while, he had a man come in and box it up. He must have sent it away, but I never saw it go." "Was this before or after the trombone players came?" "Long after. It was after he had picked out his man and had him up there practicing." "Did you ever see this musician?" drawled Average Joe.